He thought he was just a victim of fate, until his kidnappers' voices unlocked a memory buried for years, a memory of a righteous king murdered by his own friend. What if the truth you forgot was the reason you were never meant to die? Hello beautiful people, welcome to my channel, the home of inspiring, thrilling, and unforgettable stories from Africa. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me bring more amazing stories your way. Thank you, and let's dive right into today's tale. 15 years ago, a family lost their only son and their hope with him, but when he returned from nowhere, his silence carried secrets that would shake everything they once believed. In the heart of southeastern, tucked between sprawling farmlands and a forest so thick it swallowed sunlight before it touched the ground, there was a quiet town called Endemoko. Life in Endemoko was slow and predictable, the kind of place where roosters woke the villagers before dawn, where children still fetched water from clay wells, and where everyone knew everyone. But in the year 2004, something happened that shattered the peace of this little town, something that no one could explain and that would haunt the people for almost 2 decades. It all began with a boy named Sochi Manati. Sochi, as everyone fondly called him, was the first son of Mr. and Mrs. Nadi, a middle-class couple known for their kindness and generosity. Mr. Nadi was a respected school principal, while his wife, Ngozi, ran a small but popular food shop by the roadside. They were not the richest family in Endemoko, but their home was always warm, full of laughter, and open to anyone in need. Sochi was 10 years old when the story began, a bright, curious boy with eyes that sparkled with mischief and a heart too big for his little body. He loved to climb trees, play football in the dusty field behind their compound, and ask questions about everything. People in town often said he was destined for greatness. But fate had other plans. It was a warm Saturday morning in May. The sun had barely risen, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The town was waking up slowly. Traders were opening their stalls, goats bleated in distant compounds, and the smell of fried akara floated from roadside shops. That morning, Mrs. Ngozi had asked Sochi to follow her to the local market to help carry some vegetables and spices. But Sochi, excited by his friend's invitation to a football match, begged to go instead. "Mummy, please now, just this once," he pleaded, his eyes wide. "I'll help you tomorrow, I promise." Ngozi chuckled. "You and this football, fine. But don't go far, and make sure you come back before noon." He hugged her and dashed out of the gate with his football tucked under his arm. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning, but it was the last time anyone in Endemoko saw Sochi Manati, for years. By noon, Sochi had not returned. His mother waited, thinking he had stayed to play longer. By 2 p.m., worry started to creep into her chest. By 4 p.m., Mr. Nadi had returned from an education meeting to find his wife pacing outside, her face pale and eyes swollen from tears. Maybe he followed his friends home, Mr. Nadi suggested, trying to stay calm. But as night fell, panic replaced hope. They checked every football field, every friend's house, every possible place a boy could wander, but there was no trace of Sochi. By midnight, the entire town had joined the search. Lanterns swung from trembling hands as neighbors combed the bush paths and riverbanks. Hunters with dogs sniffed the forest edges. Even the local vigilante group patrolled till dawn. Still, nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed Sochi whole. The first few days were a blur of tears and prayers. Mr. and Mrs. Nadi hardly ate or slept. They clung to the hope that Sochi had been kidnapped and would be returned for ransom. But no calls came. Posters with his picture were pasted on electric poles and church walls. Radio stations announced his disappearance. A small reward was offered for information. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no news. Rumors began to swirl. Some whispered that he had been taken for ritual purposes. Others believed he might have fallen into the deep forest and been devoured by wild animals. A few even blamed the family, saying perhaps an ancestral curse was at play. Mrs. Nadi refused to believe any of it. Every evening, she stood at the gate, staring at the dusty road, whispering, "Sochi will come home. My son will come home." Mr. Nadi became a shadow of himself, quiet, withdrawn, and bitter. He stopped going to community meetings. He lost interest in his work. Sometimes, he wandered into Sochi's empty room and sat there for hours, staring at the wall. Ngozi's health deteriorated. She cried until her voice cracked, prayed until her knees bruised, and visited every prophet, herbalist, and police station she could find. Each time, she returned home with nothing but false promises and deeper heartbreak. 3 years after Sochi's disappearance, the Nadiz's marriage began to crumble. They blamed themselves, then each other. Their laughter vanished. Their home, once full of joy, became a place of silence and sorrow. Time moved forward, even when the Nadis felt frozen in grief. Children who once played football with Sochi grew up, went to secondary school, and left town. New families moved into Endamoko. Shops changed owners. Roads were repaired. But for Mr. and Mrs. Nadi, time had stopped in 2004. They refused to leave the town, clinging to the hope that one day, somehow, Sochi would walk through the front gate again. Every year on May 14th, the day he disappeared, they held a small prayer service in his memory. Villagers attended less and less each year, but the Nadis never stopped. 15 years had passed since that warm Saturday morning. Sochi would have been 25 now, a grown man, maybe even married. But in the minds of his parents, he was still that bright-eyed boy with a football under his arm. One cloudy afternoon, in August 2019, a black SUV pulled into Endamoko, a rare sight in the small town. It stopped near the local primary school, and from it stepped a tall, well-dressed man in his mid-20s. He had a distant look in his eyes, as if searching for something familiar. Villagers watched him curiously. He walked slowly down the street, pausing in front of buildings as though trying to remember. And then, he stopped in front of the Nadi compound. He stood there for a long time, staring at the gate. His chest rose and fell heavily. Finally, he knocked. "I think I belong here. Mrs. Ngozi opened the door, expecting a visitor or customer. Instead, she saw a stranger, tall, neat, and serious. "Good afternoon, Ma," he said softly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I belong here." Her brows furrowed. "I'm sorry, young man. Do I know you?" I'm not sure," he said, struggling with his words. "But I've been having dreams about this house. Dreams about a woman who calls me Sochi." The bowl in her hand fell to the ground. Her heart stopped. What did you just say?" "Sochi," he repeated, looking into her eyes. "I don't know why, but I feel like that's my name." The air around the Nadi compound grew still. Mrs. Ngozi's hands trembled as she stared at the stranger before her, this tall young man with eyes so hauntingly familiar. The way he stood, the way his lips curved nervously when he spoke, even the faint dimple that appeared when he smiled, all of it stirred something deep within her. "Who sent you?" she stammered, taking a step back. "No one," the young man replied gently. "I came on my own. I don't even know why. I felt drawn here." For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then, without thinking, Mrs. Ngozi reached out and touched his arm. It was warm, real. Not a dream, not a ghost. "Come inside," she whispered. The young man stepped into the Nadi family home, looking around as though each corner carried a forgotten memory. His eyes lingered on the wooden cabinet near the door, the worn-out sofa, the family portraits on the wall. His gaze stopped at one picture, a photo of a little boy grinning widely, clutching a football under his arm. "Who is he?" the young man asked softly. Mrs. Ngozi's throat tightened. "That's my son. His name was Soshima." He echoed, a frown forming. "He disappeared 15 years ago," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "And we never found him." The young man stared at the photo longer, his breathing uneven. "I've seen that face before, in my dreams," he murmured. I keep seeing a boy playing football, and a woman calling him Sochi from the doorway. Tears spilled down Mrs. Ngozi's cheeks. That was me. By the time Mr. Nadi returned home that evening, he found his wife sitting across from the stranger, talking in low, trembling voices. His brows knitted as soon as he saw the unfamiliar figure. "Who is this?" he asked sharply. "Chikuti," the young man said quickly. "At least, that's the name I was given. But I think I might be someone else." Mr. Nadi's eyes narrowed. "Someone else? What is this, Ngozi?" She rose and took his hands, her voice breaking. "He says he's been having dreams about this house, about us. And he called our son's name without ever seeing this picture." Mr. Nadi stared at the young man for a long time. He wanted to scoff, to throw him out and call it a cruel prank, but something deep inside held him still. The young man's eyes, there was something painfully familiar about them. "Sit," he said finally, his tone softer. "Tell me everything." They spoke late into the night. The young man explained that he had no memories before the age of 10. He had woken up one day on the roadside near Omuahia, bruised and confused, with no name and no memory. A kind woman named Mama Ruth had found him and taken him in, naming him Chikuti. She raised him as her own, and he grew up believing he was an orphan abandoned by his parents. But in recent years, strange dreams had begun haunting him. Dreams of a compound with a mango tree in the front yard, a woman with tear-stained cheeks calling out Sochi, and the sound of a whistle blowing over a football field. At first, he dismissed them as imagination. But the dreams grew stronger, more vivid, and too real to ignore. They led him to search, and that search had brought him here, to Endamoko. When he finished speaking, silence filled the room again. Mr. Nadi rubbed his temples. "Do you remember anything else? Any names? Any places?" "Only one," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I remember someone calling me Soshima, right before everything went dark." The following days were a blur of emotions. The young man, Chikuti, or Sochi, visited often, sometimes sitting quietly under the mango tree, sometimes walking around the compound like a child rediscovering a lost playground. Mrs. Ngozi followed him closely, watching every movement, every reaction. She noticed how he instinctively knew where the kitchen was, how he paused outside Sochi's old bedroom, and how his favorite dish turned out to be okra soup, the very meal her son had always loved. Her heart screamed, "This is him." But her mind whispered, "What if it's not?" One evening, unable to hold back any longer, she asked, "Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" He looked at her with quiet determination. "Yes, I want to know the truth too." A week later, blood samples were taken. The test would take 2 weeks, 2 painfully slow weeks that felt like years. During that time, the Nadiz's lives changed. Hope returned to their home like sunlight after a long storm. Mr. Nadi, once withdrawn, began telling stories again. Mrs. Ngozi hummed as she cooked, something she hadn't done in over a decade. And the young man, he began calling them Mama and Papa, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. But not everyone in Endamoko shared their joy. Rumors spread like wildfire. "They are being deceived," one villager whispered. "That boy just wants their money." "It's been 15 years, said another. "There's no way he's the same person." The Nadis tried to ignore the gossip, but deep down, fear gnawed at them. What if the results shattered their fragile hope? On the 10th night after the test, the young man awoke from a terrifying dream, one that felt more like a memory. He saw himself playing football, running down a dirt road, and then, headlights, screeching tires, and darkness. He jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The next morning, he shared the dream with Mr. Nadi. "It felt real," he said. I think I was hit by a car." Mr. Nadi's eyes widened. "That could explain why you lost your memory." "Maybe," the young man murmured. "But there's more. I remember someone pulling me into a car after that. A man, I couldn't see his face." A few days later, an old woman arrived at the Nadi compound. She was frail, leaning on a cane, and her eyes widened when she saw the young man. "Mama Ruth," he breathed. "Yes," she said softly. "I heard you were here." The room fell silent as she told her story. 15 years ago, she had been walking along the Omuahia road when she found a boy lying unconscious in a ditch. He had a head wound and no memory of who he was. "I tried to find his family," she said, tears filling her eyes. "But there was nothing. No name, no clue. I raised him like my own." Mr. Noddy clasped her hands. "Thank you. You gave our son a life when the world took him from us." On a quiet Monday morning, 2 weeks after the test, a white envelope arrived from the laboratory. The family gathered in the living room, hearts pounding. Mr. Noddy's hands shook as he tore it open. He read the first line silently, then gasped. "Mrs. Ngozi clutched his arm. "What does it say?" He looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "It says, he is our son." The room exploded into sobs and laughter. Mrs. Ngozi fell to her knees, thanking God over and over. The young man, Sochi, held her as tears streamed down his own cheeks. After 15 long years, the boy who vanished had finally come home. The rain came without warning that afternoon, heavy and relentless, drumming against the tin roofs of Endemoko like an army of angry fists. Inside the Noddy home, the air was warm and filled with the smell of simmering pepper soup, but no one was thinking about food. They were thinking about him, the boy who had come home after 15 years. Soshima. Even now, weeks after the DNA result confirmed it, the name felt unreal to say. He was no longer the small boy who had vanished playing football on the dusty village field. He was a man now, with broad shoulders and a deep, thoughtful gaze. But deep within those eyes, a storm was forming, flashes of memory that refused to stay buried. It started with nightmares. At first, they were faint and scattered, broken faces, harsh voices, the screech of car brakes. But as days passed, they sharpened, stitching themselves together into something that felt dangerously close to truth. One night, he woke drenched in sweat, clutching his chest as a single phrase echoed in his mind. He saw everything. We must keep him quiet. He couldn't remember who said it, but the words chilled him to the bone. Life in the Noddy compound had become a careful balance of joy and unease. There were moments of laughter, like when Mr. Noddy taught Sochi how to ride the old bicycle he'd abandoned as a boy, or when Mama Ngozi insisted on cooking every meal he loved. But there were also moments of silence, heavy and unsettling, when they'd catch him staring into space, lost in thought, as if fighting with ghosts no one else could see. And then the strange things began to happen. At first, it was small, a figure lurking near the mango tree at night, a black car parked across the road with tinted windows. Mr. Noddy dismissed it as paranoia, but Sochi's gut told him otherwise. Someone was watching them, someone who did not want him to remember. The first memory returned unexpectedly, while he was walking through the market one morning with Mama Ngozi. They had stopped by a yam stall when the sound of a police siren in the distance froze him in place. His heart pounded, his breathing grew shallow, and suddenly, he wasn't in the market anymore. He was on a dusty street. He was 10 again. A man in a brown agbada was shouting angrily at another man near a parked van. Then there was a gunshot. Sharp, deafening, and a body hit the ground. A woman screamed, and Sochi, hiding behind a stack of wooden crates, had seen everything. The world spun. He clutched his head and fell to his knees. Sochi, what is it? Mama Ngozi cried, holding his shoulders. I saw something, he gasped. A shooting. A man was killed. Are you sure? She asked gently, her voice trembling. He nodded. I was there. I think I witnessed a murder before the accident. The revelation shook the family to its core. That night, they sat around the dining table in stunned silence. A murder, Mr. Noddy asked, his brows furrowed. Are you certain? I don't remember faces, Sochi admitted. But it felt real, like something I had tried to forget. Mr. Nadi exchanged a worried glance with his wife. If that's true, then maybe your disappearance wasn't an accident. Maybe someone wanted you gone. The words hung heavy in the air. A few days later, another piece of the puzzle surfaced. Sochi was cleaning out the old storage room when he found a rusted whistle tucked away in a wooden box. The moment his fingers touched it, a memory jolted through him. Not a vision this time, but a sound. Footsteps running. A man shouting, "Get him! He saw us!" He dropped the whistle, his heart racing. "They chased me," he whispered. "After the shooting, they chased me." That night, he shared the memory with his parents. Mr. Nadi's hands tightened into fists. "We have to go to the police." "No," Sochi said firmly. "Not yet. I need to remember more. If we go too early, we might alert whoever was involved. They could be watching." And deep down, they all knew he was right. But the past was not going to stay hidden quietly. One evening, as dusk bled into night, a knock came at the door. Mr. Nadi opened it to find a stranger, a tall man in a dark suit, his face half hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Good evening," the man said calmly. "I'm looking for Soshima." Mr. Nadi's instincts screamed, "Who are you?" "Just someone from his past," the man replied with a faint smile. "Please tell him I'll be in town for a few days. He'll know where to find me." Before they could ask another question, the man turned and walked into the darkness. That night, Sochi couldn't sleep. The stranger's words gnawed at him. Someone from his past. Could he have been there on that day? Did he know the truth? The dreams returned, clearer now. This time, he saw the faces. One was a man he recognized vaguely, a local politician who had visited their village once when he was a boy. The other, his heart nearly stopped when he realized it was someone even closer. It was Mr. Odili, his father's business partner, a man he'd called Uncle his entire childhood. In the memory, Odili wasn't the kind man he remembered. He was shouting orders, pointing at the body on the ground. And then his voice echoed again. He saw everything. Find that boy. The next morning, Sochi shared what he'd seen. Mr. Nadi went pale. "Odili," he whispered. "That's impossible. He's been my partner for over 20 years. Are you sure you can trust him?" Sochi asked quietly. The question lingered painfully. Mr. Nadi didn't answer. But that same afternoon, the black car returned, this time parking directly across from their gate. A man in a cap sat behind the wheel, pretending to read a newspaper. Sochi's instincts screamed danger. Whoever they were, they knew he was remembering. The tension reached a breaking point 3 nights later. Sochi had gone out for a walk when a hand grabbed him from behind and pulled him into a dark alley. Before he could react, a cloth pressed against his nose, chloroform. His vision blurred. The last thing he heard was a voice whispering, "You should have stayed forgotten." When he woke, he was in a dimly lit room, his hands bound. 2 men stood nearby, speaking in low tones. One of them was the man from the doorstep. "We can't let him talk," the man muttered. "If he remembers everything, it's over." Sochi fully regained his memory now, and he remembered how his friends kicked the old football toward the bushy field behind the village stream. Laughter echoed through the trees, until the ball rolled too far. Sochi ran after it, not knowing fate was leading him to witness something no child should ever see. Hidden behind a thick bush, he froze. 2 men stood before a kneeling figure, the righteous King Obis. And there was Odili, the man everyone respected, holding a machete with shaking hands. "Please, my friend," the king pleaded softly, "don't let greed destroy your soul." But Odili's eyes burned with jealousy. "You took everything, even the people's love that should have been mine." He shouted, and before the king could rise, Odili struck. Once, twice. The king fell against the cold earth, blood soaking the roots. Sochi gasped, but before he could run, a shadow moved behind him. A hand covered his mouth. Then darkness swallowed him whole. That was the last thing he remembered before losing his memory, until the kidnappers' voices brought it all rushing back years later. Sochi's heart pounded as the kidnappers argued among themselves. Their voices, rough, deep, and angry, tore open a door in his mind that had been locked for years. He pressed his hands against his head as flashes of the past burned through his thoughts. The football, the bushes, the scream, and the cold silence after the king fell. Then he saw Odili's face clearly, lit by the trembling lantern that night. Tears rolled down Sochi's cheeks. So that was it. That was why he had vanished all those years ago. He wasn't just a missing boy, he was a witness to a king's murder. As he wept quietly, one of the kidnappers turned and barked, "What's wrong with him?" Another laughed, "Leave him." The boy Don crazed small. But their laughter stopped when Sochi spoke, his voice calm, filled with new strength. "You think you can hide forever? Evil always finds its way back to its owner." The men froze. Something about his tone made them uneasy. And before they could react, the police, who had been tracking the group for weeks, surrounded the camp. There was shouting, running, gunfire in the air, and when the dust settled, Sochi was free again. Days later, in the hospital, he told his father everything, how he had seen King Obi's death, how Odili's greed led to the fall of a great man. The authorities reopened the old case. Odili, now an old and broken man, was found living in isolation. When Sochi stood before him, Odili wept bitterly. "I killed a king," he said, "but I buried my peace with him." Sochi looked at him silently, then whispered, "The truth may sleep, but it never dies." The end. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Your time means the world to me, and I don't take it for granted. Every view, every like, every comment, they encourage me more than you can imagine. I pray that as you support me, God will support you too. May favor find you, may joy never depart from your life, and may all your dreams come true. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to support my growth. Stay safe, stay blessed. See you next time. Bye bye.